Alright, let's start this saga where all great HOA horror stories begin, with something ridiculously petty. You'd think this was about property taxes or house paint, or maybe a fence an inch too high. Nope.
Mine?
A trash can. Yes, a trash can. My humble green bin, faithful holder of pizza boxes, Amazon returns, and that one mystery Tupperware I was too scared to open. It had been sitting quietly by my driveway for years, minding its business. But then came the wrath of Karen. Now, if you've never met a full-blown HOA Karen, let me paint you a picture. Imagine someone who treats the HOA rulebook like it's the U.S. Constitution, except she thinks she's both George Washington and the Supreme Court. Karen had binoculars for spotting violations, a notebook thicker than War and Peace for documenting offenses, and a personality that could curdle milk. At first, it started small. I noticed one Monday morning that my trash can wasn't upright. I thought, maybe the wind. Next week, same thing. Week 3, again. Only this time it was halfway down the street, like it had joined a marathon without me. That's when I realized this wasn't weather. This was sabotage. And I had a prime suspect. You see, Karen had already made her feelings about my trash can loud and clear. She had marched up to me once, clipboard in hand, and listen, this wasn't just inconvenient. This was war. Because picking up garbage first thing in the morning, that's how villains are born. I was one soggy paper plate away from losing my sanity. So I started investigating. Cue the spy music. I checked weather reports. No wind. I looked for raccoons. None. I even thought about teenagers playing pranks. But nope, the neighborhood kids were too busy making TikToks to bother with old-school trash tipping. Which left me with one conclusion. Karen was on the loose. The first time I caught her, it was almost comical. I peeked through my blinds at 6:30 a.m., coffee in hand, robe on, and there she was, creeping down the street in her pink tracksuit like a ninja at a yoga retreat. She glanced left. She glanced right. Then, wham! She shoulder-checked my trash can like it had insulted her family. I almost spit out my coffee. I wasn't mad yet, I was impressed. Who wakes up before dawn to fight with someone else's garbage? Who has that level of commitment? Karen did. But admiration quickly turned to fury when this became a weekly ritual. My mornings were no longer peaceful. They were filled with the sound of cans clattering and my muttered curses as I picked up apple cores off the sidewalk. And here's the kicker. Karen didn't stop there. She escalated. One day, I found my bin lid snapped clean off, like someone had kicked it. Another day, it had been dragged all the way into the cul-de-sac. And the thing about HOAs is, people notice. They gossip. They judge. Suddenly, I felt like the neighborhood outcast. All because my trash can was being turned into a weekly circus act. But here's the mistake Karen made. She underestimated two things. My patience and my creativity. Because if she thought I was going to just sit back and accept garbage chaos every week, she was dead wrong. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, notes with dates and times. My Google Drive became a shrine to trash can injustice. I had more evidence than a true crime documentary. And the more I documented, the angrier I got. Not just because of the mess, but because of the principle. Trash cans are boring. They are necessary. They are the Switzerland of household items. Neutral, unproblematic, quietly doing their job. But in Karen's world, they were weapons. And I wasn't about to let my green plastic soldier go down without a fight. The neighborhood thought this was just trash. But I knew it was the beginning of something much bigger. Because if Karen could control where my bin stood, what was next? My mailbox? My car? My life choices? No. This was the hill I was going to die on. Or rather, the bin I was going to defend. And so began the trash wars. Now, a normal person might have confronted Karen directly. But me? Oh no. I had a better plan. If Karen was going to play HOA rulebook games, then I was going to beat her at her own game. Because knowledge is power. Alright, so picture me standing in my living room, staring at my coffee-stained HOA rulebook like it was the Rosetta Stone. I had avoided opening this thing for years, because honestly, I'd rather binge-watch paint dry than read HOA legalese. But desperate times call for desperate measures. And this wasn't just about garbage anymore. This was about justice. I pulled out the binder. It was thick, thicker than a Sunday Bible and twice as cryptic. Each section was filled with words like aesthetics, community harmony, and my personal favorite, unbecoming conduct. Like, what does that even mean? Is leaving Christmas lights up past January unbecoming? Because if so, half the block was guilty. But I wasn't flipping through this thing for fun. I had a mission. Find out if Karen actually had a rule on her side, or if she was just freelancing as the self-appointed trash police. And let me tell you, what I found was golden. Nowhere, let me repeat this, nowhere in the entire 92 pages did it say anything about trash cans needing to be hidden, camouflaged, or shielded from Karen's delicate eyes. Nothing. Zilch.
Nada.
Oh, they had plenty of nonsense about house colors, only earth tones approved by the committee, and lawn height limits. No grass exceeding 3 inches, but trash bins? Not a single line. This meant one thing. Karen had been bluffing. She'd been knocking over my bin, claiming aesthetics violations, when in reality, the only violation was her abusing neighborly decency. But here's where it got interesting. Buried deep in Section 14, Article 3, I found a little gem. Willful damage to another resident's property shall be considered a breach of conduct and subject to fines, disciplinary hearings, and legal action. I nearly choked on my coffee. Did you catch that? Willful damage to another resident's property. And my poor trash can, lid snapped, wheels bent, practically limping across my drive. Karen thought she was running the HOA show, but she'd actually been writing me the perfect case against her. So what did I do? Did I immediately storm into the next HOA meeting and slam the binder on the table like I was a lawyer on Law and Order? Nope. I did something better. I started plotting. See, in HOA world, it's not enough to be right. You have to be clever. These meetings are basically gladiator arenas where Karens thrive on intimidation and drama. If I walked in guns blazing, she'd just spin the narrative, and suddenly I would be the problem neighbor. So instead, I decided to play it slow, smart. I started dropping questions at the HOA meetings, casually, like, hey, anyone know what the rules actually say about trash bins? Or, is damage to personal property covered under HOA enforcement? Karen's face would twitch every time. She knew I was onto her. Meanwhile, I started networking with the other neighbors. If Karen had declared war on my trash, I needed allies. And boy, did I find them. Turns out, she had beef with half the community already. The Johnsons? She once fined them for leaving a garden gnome on their porch. The Rodriguezes? She tried to ban their kids' lemonade stand for being unlicensed commerce. The Petersons? They got a violation notice for having a patio umbrella that was apparently too festive. So when I brought up my little trash can situation, guess what? Everyone had a Karen horror story of their own. Suddenly, it wasn't just about my garbage. It was about years of pent-up frustration. And just like that, the trash wars became the HOA rebellion. But Karen wasn't stupid. She could sense the shift. One day, she cornered me in the driveway, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon. You need to move that trash can. Funny, I said, holding up my phone, because the bylaws don't say a word about trash cans. But they do say something about damaging neighbors' property. She froze, just for a split second, then stormed off, muttering about disrespect and proper order. That's when I knew I had her. She was rattled, and a rattled Karen is a dangerous Karen. Sure enough, the sabotage escalated. One morning, I woke up to find my trash bin not only knocked over, but spray painted. Someone had scrawled "pig" across it in red letters. Now, I'm not saying it was Karen, but let's be real. Who else in the neighborhood carried spray paint in their Subaru? I took pictures. I saved receipts. And I waited. Because here's the thing. I didn't want to just win. I wanted to crush this HOA nonsense once and for all. The next HOA meeting was my moment. I walked in with a binder, a USB drive of photos, and an entire PowerPoint presentation titled, Trash Can Tyranny, a case study. The neighbors chuckled. Karen's face turned redder than a... For the first time, the tide turned. People weren't laughing at my trash problem anymore. They were angry with me. Karen wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the villain. And oh, how the mighty squirmed. The board voted to investigate the matter. Karen stormed out of the meeting. And me? I sat there, calm as could be, sipping my water like a man who had just won the opening round of a very long game. Because this wasn't over. Oh no, this was only the beginning. The trash wars had gone public. And now, the whole neighborhood was watching. Of course, Karen wasn't going down without a fight. She had her pride, her clipboard, and her desperate need for control. Which meant, if she couldn't win in the meetings, she'd try something else. And what she did next made the trash can battles look like child's play. You'd think, after getting roasted at the HOA meeting with her clipboard pride shattered, Karen might have taken a step back. Maybe gone on vacation, watered her roses, or just, I don't know, stopped being Karen for 5 minutes. But no. See, Karens don't retreat. They escalate. And this one, she went full villain mode. Started small. Little things. My mail went missing. Nothing crazy, just random catalogs, a coupon booklet, the usual junk. But then, one week, my electricity bill never arrived. And let's just say the power company doesn't play games. I got hit with a late fee, and that's when I knew someone was messing with me. And who in the world has both the free time and pettiness level required to stock a mailbox? Yeah, Karen. But she didn't stop there. Oh no. One morning, I walked outside to find my driveway dusted in flour. Flour. Like some deranged baker had staged a seance out front. At first, I thought maybe kids had been pranking. But then I noticed the trail of powder led directly to Karen's immaculate flower beds. Coincidence? Please. The woman alphabetizes her pantry. Nothing in her life is a coincidence. The neighbors, of course, started whispering. Every time something weird happened. Garden hose mysteriously slashed, Amazon packages going missing, random flyers taped to my door about trash hygiene. I didn't even have to say her name. People would just shrug and go, yeah, Karen. But here's the thing about revenge. It always says more about the person plotting it than the person receiving it. And in Karen's case, her campaign of chaos was basically an unpaid advertisement for her obsession. Still, one Saturday I rolled my trash bin out because, that's what trash bins are for, and went inside to grab coffee. 10 minutes later I came back out, and it was gone. Not tipped over. Not spray painted. Gone. Vanished. Now, unless my trash bin suddenly developed legs and ran off to live its best life, I knew exactly what happened. Karen had finally done it. She'd kidnapped my garbage. So what did I do? I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I didn't even confront her. Nope. I grabbed my phone, opened the app for my brand new doorbell camera. Oh yeah, I'd installed one of those. And there it was, clear as daylight, Karen hauling my trash bin across the street, dragging it behind her like some trophy she'd won in the HOA Hunger Games. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Because now I didn't just have suspicions. I had proof. But here's where it gets even better. I waited a couple of hours, then casually strolled into the HOA's group email chain. Attached the footage.
No caption. No explanation.
Just the video. The replies started rolling in within minutes. The Johnsons. Unbelievable. She's lost it. The Rodriguezes. This is harassment. Pure and simple. The Petersons. She did the same thing with our umbrella once. Meanwhile, Karen's response? Radio silence. Not a peep. For someone who loved to run her mouth about community standards. She suddenly had the audacity was almost impressive. Like, imagine losing a game of Monopoly and then demanding the rules be changed so hotels don't count against you. That was Karen. But here's the kicker. To pass the bylaw, she needed a majority vote. Which meant the neighborhood showdown was officially on. Now, I could have just marched into that meeting, waved my doorbell footage, and made Karen look like a clown all over again. But I had a better idea. I rallied the troops. Remember all those neighbors who'd been burned by her over the years? The gnome victims? The lemonade stand rebels? The patio umbrella outlaws? Yeah, they were ready. I printed flyers, knocked on doors, and basically turned it into a grassroots campaign. Vote No on trash tyranny. By the time the meeting rolled around, the clubhouse was packed. People were holding signs. Signs. At an HOA meeting, Karen strutted in, clipboard clutched like a holy relic, and started her speech about preserving community beauty. But the crowd wasn't buying it. When she mentioned aesthetic harmony, someone in the back actually booed. Booed. At an HOA meeting. I almost cried tears of joy. Then it was my turn. I walked up, cleared my throat, and hit them with the big one. Fellow residents, do we really want to live in a neighborhood where our property rights are dictated by personal vendettas? Because this isn't about trash cans, it's about control. And I think we've all had enough of that. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, nodding heads. It was like the HOA version of a standing ovation. The vote came down, and guess what? Karen lost. Badly. The bylaw was rejected, and she stormed out of the clubhouse like a villain at the end of Act 2, swearing vengeance. And vengeance, my friends, was exactly what she had in mind. Because if she couldn't beat me with the rulebook, she'd try something even darker. But that is a story for Fact 4. So, you'd think after a crushing defeat, Karen would lick her wounds and maybe, just maybe, stop obsessing over trash cans. But no. What she did next made the spray paint, the flour, and even the stolen bin look like You ever notice how when some people lose, they just lose? They accept it, move on, maybe eat a tub of ice cream while binge-watching Judge Judy. But then there are others, people like Karen, who treat losing like a temporary inconvenience. The kind of person who, instead of admitting defeat, goes full Cold War mode. And let me tell you, our neighborhood? Yeah, it became the HOA version of Berlin, divided, tense, and one accidental trash bin roll away from nuclear fallout. After her crushing defeat at the trash tyranny vote, Karen didn't disappear. Oh no, she doubled down. She became quieter, more calculated. If before she was a loud, nagging mosquito buzzing in everyone's ear, now she was a snake, slithering in the grass, waiting to strike. First came the petty campaigns. One morning, a brand new anonymous flyer showed up on every doorstep. Big bold letters across the top. Are your neighbors bringing down property values? Gee, I wonder who wrote that. Inside the flyer, it listed things like, Then, some genius in the neighborhood set up a parody account on Nextdoor called Karen's HOA Watch. It posted memes about people putting their bins out 2 minutes early, jokes about mailbox paint colors, and fake emergency alerts like, Alert! Neighbor spotted with mismatched patio cushions. Report immediately. It was glorious. The whole neighborhood followed it. And Karen? She hated it. She marched into the next HOA meeting demanding the account be taken down. The board just shrugged. It's satire, Karen. You could practically see steam shooting out of her ears. But while all this comedy was unfolding, the tension was real. People started picking sides. Some neighbors, tired of her antics, rallied behind me and the live and let live philosophy. Others, especially the ones who secretly liked her micromanaging, started whispering that maybe Karen was right. Maybe we did need stricter rules to maintain order. It was like the community was split down the middle. Cookouts turned into debates. Book clubs became strategy sessions. Even the dog park felt like a demilitarized zone. And then, Karen made her boldest move yet. One evening, that's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was trying to rewrite history, pretend the vote never happened, gaslight the whole community into believing her trash rules were already law. And folks, that's dangerous, because if there's one thing scarier than an HOA Karen with a clipboard, it's an HOA Karen with influence. So, I knew what I had to do, fight fire with fire. I gathered every shred of evidence I had, doorbell cam footage, photos, logs. One by one, I laid out the evidence. The stolen bin, the flower driveway, the flyers, the fake violation notice. The crowd gasped, booed, clapped. It was like a courtroom drama, and I was nailing the closing argument. When I finally said, and that is why I motioned to remove Karen from the HOA board, the room went silent for a second, and then, applause. The vote passed. Karen was out, or so we thought. Because here's the thing about Cold Wars, they don't end with one battle. They end when one side finally surrenders. And Karen? She wasn't built to surrender. So while we thought we'd finally won, she was already plotting her comeback. And trust me, what she did next made everything before look like child's play. You'd think getting booted from the HOA board would slow her down. But nope, Karen doesn't slow down. She reloads. And her next move? Well, let's just say it was the nuclear option. You know that moment in every action movie where the villain, beaten, bruised, and cornered, suddenly presses the big red button? That was Karen. She'd been booted off the board, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, and exposed for her fake violation campaign. Any normal human would have taken the L, maybe moved on or at least gone inside, poured themselves a glass of boxed wine, and cried it out while scrolling Zillow for a new HOA to terrorize. But Karen? Nah, she doesn't cry. She plots. And her next move wasn't just petty. It wasn't just vindictive. It was nuclear. It started innocently enough. A few weeks after the special meeting, weird letters started showing up in people's mailboxes. Not flyers this time, official-looking letters. Typed, formatted, stamped. The kind of thing you'd expect from a lawyer, not a neighbor with too much free time. The letters claimed that our HOA had been mismanaging funds. That we, the residents, were victims of financial fraud. That unless we took immediate action, our property values would plummet. And of course, she signed them anonymously. But let's be real, nobody believed for 1 second that it wasn't Karen behind it. First, people laughed. Oh, here she goes again, they said. But then someone asked the dangerous question, wait, what if she's right? And boom, just like that, doubt started spreading faster than gossip at a beauty salon. Homeowners began demanding answers from the board. Where's our money going? Are our dues being spent properly? What about that landscaping contract? And you know what? They weren't wrong to ask. Transparency matters. But the way Karen framed it, it turned every legitimate concern into gasoline for her revenge fire. And then, she did the unthinkable. Karen filed a lawsuit. Yep, against the HOA. Now let me tell you, when Karen rolled into small claims court with her giant binder, color-coded tabs, and a look that said, I watch Judge Judy religiously, you could feel the collective groan across the neighborhood. She alleged financial mismanagement, negligence, failure to enforce bylaws, you name it. She basically accused the HOA of being the Enron of cul-de-sacs. And here's the kicker. While the lawsuit was frivolous, it forced the board to lawyer up, which meant money, which meant our dues. So in a twisted way, Karen was bleeding us dry without even winning. That's what made it the nuclear option. It didn't matter if she was right or wrong. The fallout hit everyone. Suddenly, the neighborhood was tense again. Meetings got heated. Neighbors who once laughed at her antics now whispered, what if she's onto something? What if we're the fools? I'll never forget one meeting where she stood up in the back of the room, holding a stack of papers as thick as a phone book. She waved it in the air like a holy text and declared, I will not rest until justice is served. Half the room groaned. The other half clapped. And me? I just wanted to throw myself into the nearest recycling bin and hope someone took me away. But here's where it gets interesting. Because if you push people too far, even people who hate meetings, who would rather eat glass than read HOA bylaws, you wake up something powerful, unity. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't just annoyed with Karen. They were fed up, done, over it. So we fought back. One neighbor, a retired accountant, volunteered to audit the HOA's finances. Another, a lawyer, offered pro bono help. We organized town halls, shared every receipt, every expense, every landscaping contract. We turned Karen's nuclear option into an opportunity for total transparency. And guess what? The books were clean. Not a dime unaccounted for. Not a penny misplaced. Karen's whole case crumbled. When the judge finally dismissed her lawsuit, calling it without merit and bordering on harassment, you could feel the collective sigh of relief echoing through the county. But here's the thing. Nuclear fallout doesn't disappear overnight. Even after the dismissal, the scars remained. Neighbors were more suspicious. Friendships were strained. And the trust we once had in our community? Yeah, that had to be rebuilt brick by brick. And Karen? Did she slink away quietly into the shadows? Of course not. She doubled down on the victim narrative, told anyone who'd listen that she was silenced, that the system was corrupt, that she was the only one brave enough to stand up to the HOA regime. But here's what she didn't realize. By going nuclear, she had destroyed her own credibility. Even the people who once sided with her started pulling back. Because nobody likes being dragged into drama that costs them money. The final nail in the coffin came at the next election. Karen naturally tried to run for the board again. She plastered the neighborhood with campaign signs. Vote for accountability. Vote for integrity. Yeah, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. But when the votes were counted, she didn't just lose. She came in dead last. Even the guy who ran on the platform of free hot dogs at every meeting beat her. That night, I looked out my window and saw her pulling up her campaign signs in the dark, shoving them into her trunk, muttering under her breath. And for the first time in months, I felt peace. But let me be real with you. Peace in an HOA is never permanent. Because the Karens of the world, they don't retire. They reload. And while we may have survived the nuclear option, the fallout, oh, we'd be dealing with that for a long, long time. You'd think after losing in court, in elections, and in the court of public opinion, Karen would finally wave the white flag. But nope. She had one last card to play, and trust me, it was her most bizarre move yet. You know how in horror movies, the villain always has that one final jump scare? The music fades. The hero breathes a sigh of relief, and then, bam, Freddy pops out of the closet. That was Karen. We thought the nuclear option was her swan song. Court case dismissed, campaign crushed, credibility tanked. Honestly, the only thing lower than her approval rating was the neighborhood Wi-Fi speed. But Karen? Oh no, she wasn't done. She had one last play. And this one wasn't about money. It wasn't about bylaws. It wasn't even about her ego anymore. It was about legacy. It all started with a Facebook post. Late at night, Karen dropped a long, rambling manifesto in our community group. You know the type. Caps lock, emojis that made no sense, and enough hashtags to crash Instagram. She wrote, "This neighborhood used to stand for something. Before corruption. Before greed. Before silencing. I will not let my community die in darkness. If the board will not lead with honor, I will." Dramatic, right? It read like a rejected Marvel monologue. But then came the kicker. She announced she was starting her own alternative HOA. Yep, you heard me. An HOA within the HOA. A shadow government of cul-de-sacs. She called it the Real Neighborhood Association. And her pitch? Join me, and together we'll reclaim our community values. First, we laughed. I mean, come on.
Arriba el HOA?
What was she going to do? Issue parallel violation letters? Fine us in monopoly money? Host secret meetings in her garage? But then, people started signing up. A handful at first, her diehard loyalists, the ones who believed the earth is flat and that Karen was some kind of suburban prophet. Then a few more, the folks who just loved chaos. Before long, she had about a dozen households pledging allegiance to her alternative HOA. They held their own meetings, complete with agendas, minutes, and even a little gavel she bought off Amazon. And they started issuing resolutions. One declared that Halloween decorations could stay up year-round. Another said trash cans could live permanently in driveways. Yeah, I'm starting to think this whole vendetta started with trash cans. The board, of course, ignored them. We had real business to handle, like actual contracts and actual budgets. But Karen? She treated every ignored resolution like proof of tyranny. She'd post videos titled, "Exposing the Fake HOA," where she'd point at random cracks in the sidewalk and scream about injustice. It would have been funny if it hadn't started bleeding into real life. Because here's the thing, when you create a parallel universe, people get confused. Some neighbors didn't realize her letters weren't official. One guy actually paid his dues to Karen in cash. And when he got hit with a real late fee from the actual HOA, he lost it. Suddenly, we were spending meetings clarifying which HOA was real, ours. the one registered with the state, or Karen's, which was basically LARPing with clipboards, and Karen loved every second of it. But here's where her grand finale really took the cake. One afternoon, we all got an email blast. Subject line, press conference. Karen had rented out the local library's community room. She invited the press, well, okay, mostly bloggers and her cousin with an iPhone, but still. She promised a bombshell announcement. The room was packed. Residents, reporters, even the mailman showed up just to see what the circus was about. Karen strutted in wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big, carrying a folder stuffed with papers. She looked like she was about to brief the Pentagon. She walked to the podium, tapped the mic, and declared, "As president of the Real Neighborhood Association, I hereby secede from the corrupt HOA regime. Effective immediately, all members of my association are free from dues, free from fines, and free from tyranny." The room went silent. You could have heard a lawn sprinkler 3 blocks away. And then someone snorted. Someone else started laughing. Within seconds, the entire crowd was in stitches. Even the reporters couldn't keep straight faces, because Karen hadn't just jumped the shark. She'd pole vaulted over it while juggling flaming torches. Her loyalists looked around, suddenly realizing they weren't part of a revolution. They were part of a comedy sketch. One by one, they slinked out of the room. And Karen? She just stood there, red-faced, clutching her papers, muttering about conspiracies. That was it. The last gasp of the HOA Karen saga. After that, the Real Neighborhood Association fizzled. No more resolutions. No more press conferences. She still posted occasionally online, but it was mostly ignored. Without followers, without power, without even her fake HOA, Karen was just Karen. The board moved on. The neighborhood healed. Trees got planted, sidewalks fixed. The 4th of July barbecue came back bigger than ever. And slowly, people started to smile again. But here's the lesson, my friends. In every HOA, there's always a Karen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually someone will rise from the shadows, armed with petty grievances and a burning desire to rule the block like Napoleon in yoga pants. And when that happens, you have 2 choices. You can fight chaos with chaos, or you can outlast it. Because at the end of the day, Karens burn out. But communities endure. So yeah, Karen gave us lawsuits, secret HOAs, fake violations, and enough drama to fuel 5 seasons of reality TV. But she also gave us something else, unity. Because nothing brings people together quite like a common enemy. And that's the ironic truth. In trying to tear the neighborhood apart, Karen ended up gluing it together. Now, when I roll out my trash can on pickup day, I smile. Because no matter how bad things get, no matter how ridiculous HOA politics seem, at least I know we survived the saga of Karen's last stand. And trust me, if we can survive that, we can survive anything. So the next time you hear about HOA drama, just remember, behind every violation letter, every ridiculous fine, and every power-hungry neighbor, there's a story. And sometimes, those stories are so insane, they end up making your community stronger. Now, tell me in the comments, what's the wildest HOA story you've ever heard? Because let's be real, everyone's got a Karen lurking somewhere down the street.